from Kentucky by way of Detroit, landing in Sky Harbor, driving through Payson, climbing the rim here in Navajo County. I actually met Dr. Faulkner for the first time a couple years ago at the Creation Research Society's opening of their research facility, and we chatted a little bit, and then we crossed paths again last summer and chatted a little bit more, and now here we are in September, and actually it was this last spring that we crossed paths again, and we set this appointment up here. So we said he's on his way passing through to another location, and so I said, can I snag you for a night? And he said, I think we can make that work. And so the snag is in effect. And so Dr. Faulkner is a semi-retired, well, he retired from teaching at a university. He now works full-time for Answers in Genesis, and he's got some great things to share with us, sights of the heavens and how it relates to God and His Word. So, Dr. Faulkner, take it away.
Well, good evening. Good evening. You sound convinced now. I'm delighted to be here. It's always a pleasure to be in Arizona. I've been to Arizona many, many times on research trips and other things. I've driven through Show Low a number of times, but I've never, ever actually stopped and smelled the roses. So thank you for giving me a chance to spend a little time in Show Low. So anyway, so you might imagine to an astronomer, Psalm 19:1 is a pretty important verse. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims His handiwork. That's kind of like a life verse, I guess, for me. And what better way to share some of that wonder and beauty with everybody else and the handiwork of God than through astrophotography? And you may ask, what's that? Well, it's photography of the stars and other celestial objects using cameras. And amazingly enough, I only started this about 7 years or so ago. I had a bridge camera I bought, my first electronic camera I bought around 2004. And it died on me, and I had sworn for quite a while the next digital camera I get will be a single lens reflex camera, which I got. And after I had it for a little while, I realized, I can use this for astrophotography. And what kind of things can you do? Well, you can set up the tripod and then open up the camera for quite a while and take a picture something like this. This is pointing northward, and it's a half-hour exposure. For those of you who want to know specifics, it's a regular camera lens, but opened, not zoomed in, zoomed out, just a regular stock lens on my camera. And it's a ISO 100. It's ISO 100, and it's a 30-minute exposure. I have to use the bulb setting on the camera to get that, and my camera automatically shuts down, stops taking the exposure after 30 minutes. That's why it's limited to 30 minutes. I took this at Grandview Camp. It's just south of Eager. It's a little higher, 8,300 feet. I've been going there on Labor Day now for 5 years or more, I guess. And if you, at the very center is Polaris, or the North Star. You can see the stars all spinning in concentric circles around it. And at the top, that smear that you see of light, that's the Milky Way. And I took this photograph about 3 years ago, perhaps, and I took it home and I looked at it. And it wasn't until about a month later I looked very carefully at it, and I noticed there's a red glow on the horizon. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. And then above there's this kind of a green glow. Yeah. That's an aurora, northern lights. Now I couldn't see it with my eyes that night, and it turns out it shows up just barely on the camera here. But there's aurora activity going on that night, and the camera picked it up after a half an hour, so that was really cool. And I like framing it up with some trees in the foreground, so much so that when I arrived yesterday, I stayed with Michael and Michelle last night, and I took this picture from their yard last night. You can see some of the trees there in their yard, and again the North Star at the middle. Not quite centered up because I didn't want to get the house and garage in there, but up the top you can see the smeared out Milky Way again. And I've taken this a number of times. I've taken it in the east. When you do that, it tends to be kind of washed out a bit for a couple of reasons. Lower elevation, there's more scattering of the Earth's atmosphere, the starlight. There's more moisture. And where I live in suburban Cincinnati, I live in the Kentucky side, but still we have some lights from suburban Cincinnati in my neighborhood too, so you don't go quite as deep. Well, my very my second time lapse. I did some time lapse. What you do with time lapse is you take a bunch of photographs, much shorter ones, and then you put them together in a sequence. And my second attempt at time lapse is in this photograph, this one. This was taken over my house in northern Kentucky. You can see the point of the house there at the bottom. That star right above it is the North Star. And up here you can make out the Big Dipper. There's the bowl of the Dipper, and there's the handle of the Dipper. And this is a Little Dipper. There's a handle here and the 4 stars in the bowl as well. Well, that is just the beginning of it. I took, I think, over 100 photos in over about an hour. And again, this is one of my first attempts at this. And here's the time lapse you can see. This is a motion you would see over an hour's length of time, and it's going in a counterclockwise direction, as you can see. It goes around a point very close to Polaris, about 3/4 of a degree from Polaris. We call it the North Celestial Pole. Polaris, or the North Star, looks like it remains motionless. It really doesn't, but it goes to a very tiny little circle. I've taken a shot of that through a big telescope, attaching my camera to it, and you can see it go through a circle, but you have to greatly magnify it to do that. Okay, that's again in Arizona. Now, you may think working for Ansys and Genesis and Ken Ham is just a bowl full of cherries, and just, why are you laughing? You might think that it's just really cool stuff, and it is, but there's also a downside. People don't realize that there's a downside from working where they're there. The working conditions can be quite rough, in fact. And I have to be careful how I say that. Being 1,700 miles away from there, I guess I can let my hair down a little bit. You will not believe one of the things they make me do. Every year they make me take a week-long raft trip in Grand Canyon. Isn't it horrible? Just an awful thing they make me do every year. And so I take advantage of that. I started doing that just a few years ago once I started doing astrophotography. And so here's one of my jobs that I did. This is looking through the walls of the, this is actually way up in Marble Canyon on the first couple of nights in. And I'm looking through a slit there of the canyon. And I'm going to do a time lapse now. This spans 2 or 3 hours actually. And there it goes. The red glow is from people in their campsite. That bright star is Jupiter. And the Milky Way now is coming across through here. And there you go. And that's just a beautiful shot, isn't it? And when you put it in a time-lapse video, you lose some resolution. And so I grabbed one of the frames out of there just to show you what it looks like in the original. That's what it looks like in original. And I took hundreds of photos, each one about 12 or 13 megabytes to make that video. Well, last night, I have 2 cameras now. I bought a second camera last year. You see the first camera one I have, it's not programmable. So if I want to take time-lapse videos, I've got to sit there at the camera and manually take each photograph. And I do want to sleep a little bit. So last year I bought one I can program. So last night I just turned this thing on and I went to bed. So this one is over 500 images. This video is about to show you. I took it from the front porch of Michael's house. And it's over 500 images, and it's showing the Milky Way sliding through. You have some clouds early on, though. There's a moon also off to the right. And as it sets, the sky will get a little darker. These are only 8-second exposures. The last one were 13-second exposures, I believe. ISO, by the way, 6400. And this was with a wide-angle lens. And you'll see plenty of planes flying through the field, okay? Those are not meteors or anything like that. They're actually planes, probably heading to Phoenix, many of them. But here we go. This spans about 2.5 hours, I believe. And you'll see the sky slowly getting a little darker, a little better detail as the moon sets. So you can sit there in a chair on Michael's front porch, or you can watch that slowly unfold, or you can do it like I did, speed it up quite a bit. Now, my very first attempt to do time-lapse was in South Africa about 4 years ago. It was a pretty bright moon that night, and that kind of made the sky awfully bright. I was in Kruger National Park. Have you ever heard of Kruger National Park? It's this famous national park. and it's in South Africa. Now, I was thinking it was like national parks in the United States, like Grand Canyon. What do you do in Grand Canyon? Well, you drive through and you get out, you look at stuff, you get back in, you drive, you get out, and you look at stuff, and you drive on and get out. You know how that works, right? Well, that's how you don't do that in Kruger. You stay in your cars. Because if you get out of your car, there could be a lion in the brush. I'm serious. And you would never see it until it was too late. So you have to stay in your cars. They have one designated place on a long bridge over the river where you can get out between these two marks on the road. That way there's no place for lions to hide. You can look down and see the hippopotamuses in the water below you and all sorts of cool things. I looked it up when I got home. The Kruger National Park is the size of New Jersey, but it's not nearly as dangerous. So this, as I said, was we spent a night in Kruger. Now they have several campgrounds where you can go. We rented a cabin, and you have to get there by 6 p.m. But when they close the gates, and you can't leave until 6 a.m. when they open again. And you're safe. We could hear over the fence down in the river. We could hear hippos carrying on and hyenas off in the distance. So it was really kind of cool. They were actually just over the fence. I think they were pretty loud. But I went out in the parking lot and I shot this over several hours manually. This is the Milky Way, the southern Milky Way. This little splotch here, that's the Large Magellanic Cloud. That is a satellite galaxy of ours, and this is the Small Magellanic Cloud. Now there is no South Star. The South Celestial Pole is about right here. And as I run this forward, you're going to notice that the stars are going to spin around the spot that there is no star corresponding to it. And here we go. A little flashing of light. Those are from people turning around their cars in the parking lot. By the way, the Southern Cross is on there. I'll point it out to you in a minute. And there comes the clouds. The Southern Cross is right here. And the Coalsack Nebula is there. That's pretty cool. There are a lot of cool things down there. I tell people God put all the cool things down there in the southern hemisphere. We can't see them from up here. That was my first attempt. I was pretty happy with that, the way it turned out, despite a bright moon that night. I want to go back in a dark moon and try to do it again. All righty. I look at pictures like this, and I look at the Milky Way photos, and you're looking at really millions of stars. And I think about what Scripture has to say about all this. In Psalm 147:4, it says, He determines the number of the stars. He gives to all of them their names. Think about that. We only have proper names for about 200 stars, maybe 250. Beyond that, we have catalog entries for millions of stars, but there's numbers thrown together, letters thrown together. But I think when God comes up with these names, they're probably going to be really, really good names. That night in the Kruger National Park, I woke up early and went out. Skies got cloudy for a while. I came back out later when I got a little bit of sleep. A few more clouds here, but you can see the center of the Milky Way there. That is there's a bright bulge in the middle of the Milky Way, which is really cool. And I like taking Milky Way photos. Again, I took this one up at Grandview Camp here in eastern Arizona, like hour and a half, 2 hour drive from here, maybe 1 hour and a half, I guess. And that's that bulge down here, low in the sky. Gets thinner as you go up like that. The higher you go, and the drier it gets, the better the pictures get. I've shot the Milky Way from some dark locations in the east, but the elevation is not much, just maybe 3,000 feet in one place and 800 or 1,000 feet in the others. And the moisture's higher, and it just isn't as good as it is out here. So it's a delight to come out here and see this. Here's one I took before I was doing time lapse. This was the Milky Way once again in the canyon, and this was taken about 5 years ago. That's Mars down there, that bright red star. So it's a delight to see these. Now, I also like to reflect upon Isaiah 40:26. With all these millions and billions of stars, it says, "Lift up your eyes on high and see. Who created these? He who brings out their host by number, calling them all by name, by the greatness of his might, and because he is strong in power, not one is missing." Again, it repeats what we read in Psalm, that he counts them, he knows them, and he names them. Of course, if you're God of creation, the Lord of all, you made them all. It would be really strange if you couldn't count them or you couldn't name them. But he's an all-powerful God. But you know what? As big as the universe is, and as far, far bigger than the universe still is God, God focuses his attention on mankind. He's intimately concerned with our condition. So much so that he sent his only Son into the world to pay the penalty for our sin. And that to me is humbling. A God that large, that powerful, and yet that concerned with what's really nothing, should be nothing in his sight, because we are pretty tiny creatures. And it says also in Genesis 1:16, first part of the verse, he says, and God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and of course we call that the sun. And here is a photograph I took about 5 years ago of the sun, of sunspots. That's the entire sun that you're seeing there. And so you can see sunspots. They come in groups usually, or pairs, and you can see three groups showing up there, two in the middle and one to the lower right. Big complex group. And sometimes people, when they see that, they say, well, those little we have a program we do at the museum, Creation Museum, set up a telescope and show them the sun, and we see sunspots, and people say, oh, those tiny little things. And I say, well, actually, they're not as tiny as you think. You're looking at the whole sun, and the sun's pretty big, because you realize the diameter of the sun is like 860,000 miles, and the earth is only 8,000 miles. Now here's another image of the sun that I took another time with some sunspots. And you see among the spots down here, there's a little kind of like a yellow, green and blue little dot. A friend of mine photoshopped the earth in for scale. So when you look at sunspots like this one or the one in the previous slide, those spots there, a couple of those are bigger than the earth is. So, those are not tiny little spots that you're looking at. Those are actually quite large. You know, it took me 2 years to figure out how to photograph these properly. You think just put a camera out there and take a picture and you're done. Well, actually, it's not that easy. The camera does not respond the same way that the eye does. I'll give you an example. Tape recorders don't respond the same way that the ear does. You ever notice if you lay a tape recorder out on a table to listen in on a conversation and you play it back later, does it sound exactly the way it sounded? No, if you get your fingers close to it and drum the table, it'll pick that sound up really loudly, won't it? But if you got somebody standing back a ways like this, you can barely hear them, can you? But you can hear them quite fine when you're in the room. And there's a reason for that. The tape recorder responds, what we say linearly. If you double the sound level, it doubles what it records. And photographs do the same thing. If you double the light level, it doubles the response. But our ears and our eyes don't work that way. In fact, all sensory perceptions work very differently. We say they work logarithmically. And what that means, if you double the light or double the sound or double any other sensory perception, your mind, your brain doesn't process it linearly. It might be like 10% more or 20% more. So if something's twice as bright, it doesn't look twice as bright to us. It compresses those differences. And there's a reason for that. It gives you, what we say, it gives you great dynamic range. You can go outside in the daytime and see quite well. You're not blinded. You can go out at night and you can see quite well because there's enough light to see the stars with. You realize that no man-made device can do that. You have to make the adjustments on a camera. You have to change the exposure time, the ISO setting, the diaphragm setting. And so, by a roundabout way, I'm telling you, if I want to match what the eye sees, I have to play games with the camera. And it took me 2 years to figure out how to do that. And steep learning curve, that was one of the toughest lessons to learn. I know how to do it now, and I need help processing when I get done. But our eyes are so different. Our eyes work so much better than cameras do. They really do. They just don't keep a permanent record except in your memory. And then also it says that God made the lesser light to rule the night. And of course he's talking about the moon. And so I've got a few photographs of the moon I'd like to show you. I took this one with a telescope that I travel with quite a bit with my digital camera. But then last year for Christmas, I asked my wife to give me a special camera. It's called a planetary camera. It's specifically made to do the moon and the planets, but you can do other things. But it's an astronomy camera. It's not a camera you would take on vacation. It's like a big size eyepiece that fits in the telescope, and it hooks up to a computer, and you operate it off the computer. Now that's a pretty good image made with my digital SLR camera. I'm very happy with that and with my camera. But this is one I took of the moon earlier in the year with the new camera that I got. Can you see the difference? Much better resolution. I'm just getting started. I still have some, not sure how to make this work properly. So I know a couple of amateur astronomers who can take much better astrophotos than I can. I take nice photos, I think, until I see their work, and then I think, why bother? I've got one coming to visit with me in early October. We'll hope the skies will be clear and he can do a little workshop for me to help me out. I've been trying to do the planets, for instance, and I'm not up to snuff yet. What I did with this one is I cropped it and I showed the left side there and blew it up. And again, it takes resolution very well. So this is much better than I ever could before. So you have to have the right equipment. And I, for the first time in my life, I understand, really serious photographers. I know people have like 5 or 10 cameras. I'm thinking, why do you need so many cameras? Well, now I have 3. 2 regular cameras that I can use for astronomy as well, plus a specialized camera. And I suspect as time goes by, I'll probably want to get a few more. My loving wife lets me do that. She indulges me. So anyway, I'm just really jazzed about this. Before, the problem was when I tried taking pictures with my normal camera, it was a little of the Jupiter and Saturn and the planets. There are little tiny dots on the photographs, really tiny. This new planetary camera is good, and better than that, I can blow it up a bit. And here's an image I took of Jupiter back earlier this year. I hope to improve upon that. You can see a couple of dark bands in the planet. I hope to really do a lot better. Now this gets back to what the eye can do. Anybody here looked at Jupiter through the telescope? Don't raise your hand, it's dark in here. Just say yes if you have. Okay, what you remember seeing is, you may have seen 4 of its Galilean satellites or moons lined up. Remember seeing those? And you may have seen dark bands. You can see the dark bands in the atmosphere, but you can't see the moons, can you? That's because this is a camera. Remember, the camera doesn't respond the way the eye does. If I want to get in the 4 satellites, all I have to do is take a longer exposure, like this. But what happened to the bands? They're overexposed. You see, the camera can't see exactly what we can. It can take a short exposure and get the bright things well, or it can take a longer exposure and get the faint things well, but it won't get the bright things. The eye does it all. You care to argue with me that the eye is better than the camera? The eye is an incredibly complex thing, and it's a mystery to me how anybody can think that just evolved. I mean, it shows incredible design, much better design than we have, because we can't make anything that even begins to rival what the eye can do. It's amazing, isn't it? Here's an image of Saturn, and it's not too bad. It's going to get better once Jim Bonser, my friend, does his little workshop with me. But to the upper left is one of its larger satellites or moons. Its name is Titan. It's the second largest in the solar system. It's larger than Mercury by quite a bit. And if I take a long exposure, it's overexposed, but I was able to identify in this photograph 5 of the brighter satellites. It's a star to the lower right there. And they're overexposed, but I could make them out in the original quite nicely. And I could see all 5 of those with a cool telescope that I have. Well, getting back to the moon, there was a total lunar eclipse I went to, which just went through over where I lived, back in 2019 or 2018, I can't remember. I was in January. And so I set up the telescope at my house, and this is one of the photographs I took with my regular digital camera through this 13-second exposure. And I think ISO around 400 or 800. It's a total eclipse, but the deepest part of the eclipse shadow is to the lower right. Up to the upper left is on the edge of the Earth's shadow, so it's brighter up there. The red color is caused by light that's refracted through the Earth's atmosphere and into the shadow. You can see a few stars. I can see 3 on the upper left and 1 to the lower left. Picked up some background stars there as well. Now, mentioning eclipses, I took some eclipse photographs before the totality. The shadow comes in from left to right across the moon, and I took this maybe a half an hour before totality. Can you all see the shape of the Earth's umbra on the moon? Well, let me show you a photograph I took about a half an hour after totality. And there it is. Now can you see the shape? If you really have trouble, I can do it for you. It's a circle. Yeah. And that circle is over 5,000 miles across. The Earth's diameter is about 8,000 miles. At the distance of the moon, about 250,000 miles, it tapers down to over 5,000 miles, which is still larger than the 2,000 miles diameter of the moon. Now, what's the significance of the shadow being circular? Well, it tells us something about the shape of the Earth. If the Earth were round and flat like a disc, it could cast a shadow like that. However, it would only do that at midnight if the eclipse is at midnight. What if the eclipse is at sundown or sunrise? It wouldn't be a circle anymore, would it? It would be an ellipse or even a line. But every time you see a lunar eclipse, and I've seen more than a dozen total lunar eclipses and a bunch of other partials, it's always had that same circular shape. And the only shape that will cast a circular shadow, regardless of its orientation, is a sphere. There's a common myth in our culture that everybody thought the world was flat until the time of Christopher Columbus 500 years ago, who somehow showed that the Earth is not flat. But in reality, people in the West have known that the Earth is a globe for 2,500 years, 2,000 years before Columbus. For instance, in 350 BC, Aristotle wrote a book on the heavens, and he gave several arguments for the Earth being a sphere. This is one of them. That was like 2,400 years ago that he wrote that. Now, for this photograph, I reproduced that image I showed you just a moment ago during totality, and the moon must be full for there to be a total or any kind of lunar eclipse. Now, I noticed when I was looking through the telescope that the moon looked particularly large, and I suspected that it was near perigee, that is, the point of closest approach to the Earth. You see, the moon doesn't follow a circular orbit. It has an elliptical orbit, and its distance changes by about 13-14% throughout the month. So I looked it up, and sure enough, it's within a day or so of perigee, the closest point to the Earth, and so it looks bigger. To the eye, it's difficult to gauge, but photographs don't lie about this. So I looked it up, and 9 months later, in September of that year, the full moon occurred near apogee, and that's the photograph on the right. And I reproduced both of these photographs at the same scale. And you can see that the one on the left is definitely larger than the one on the right, isn't it? But again, the eye can't really tell that. That's one downside. The eye can be fooled when it comes to size, but the photograph will not be. And, we have the moon mentioned a number of times in the Old Testament, particularly in Psalm 89:37. It says, "Let the moon, like the moon, it shall be established forever, a faithful witness in the skies." So I like to look at that faithful witness. It's kind of a cool object, except I don't like full moon because they kind of blot out everything else. All right, this is a photograph of a meteor that I took during the Perseid meteor shower about 7 years ago, I'm thinking. When I first got my SLR camera, that streak you see there, the bright one, that's a meteor. This other little streak up there, I saw the meteor. I was taking pictures, and I said, I wonder, if I was standing there, I wondered if I got that meteor. Indeed, I did. But I didn't see with my eye this. This is a satellite moving across the field of view. And sometimes when I take these long exposure photographs, I found as many as 20 satellites moving across. I have to go through them frame by frame to pick out the meteors and the satellites from the airplanes. I can tell the difference because I've done this enough. By the way, amongst the clouds down here, there's a little smudgy patch right there. That's the Andromeda Galaxy right there. This is taken from my deck of my house in suburban Cincinnati. If I can get out away from the city, that helps. And so I took this photograph during the Perseid meteor shower on one of those terrible trips I had to go on in Grand Canyon about 3 years ago. It was during the Perseid shower, and I took that, and this is a wide-angle lens. The other one was not. This is a wide-angle lens. I got that for Christmas a few years ago, too. And this is one of the meteors right there. But lo and behold, in the middle right there, that's the Andromeda Galaxy again, showing up. And the Andromeda Galaxy is the most distant object you can normally see with the naked eye. You need a dark sky and away from the lights and a clear night, but it's easy to see on, evenings this time of year you can spot it. And let's see, the next year or two, I went on another raft trip during the Perseids, and this is the last night, and there's another Perseid meteor shower you can see right there, that streak. Now, what I did is I took hundreds of photographs, and I had to go through them looking for the meteors, separating out the satellites and the planes. And this is part of a time lapse. I'm going to show you the time lapse video. You can see the stars wheeling around, and I want you to notice. And by the way, there was a bit of a moon that night. That's what's illuminating the rocks there. The moon was up. It was a waning phase moon. And I want you to watch for that meteor on the time lapse. You'll see it just appear on one frame. It will not show up on the planes. Will show up on multiple ones, and they'll appear to move across the sky. But meteors will show up on only one frame. So here we go. Let's go with the time lapse as it swings down. And watch for the meteor. Say something when you see it. Yeah, there it went. Yeah, okay. Most of you saw it. So lots of planes zipping around, and then dawn happens. Just kills the mood, doesn't it? And I never get tired of doing time lapse. This is another photograph I did, or is this a time lapse? I can't remember. This is another year going through. There we go, another time lapse. And again, you see a little bright lights from some of the campers nearby. So this is really cool. And now the moon rose because it's getting washed out. Look at the moonlight come down now on the side. And unfortunately, it's about 2 o'clock at that point. This is like 2 years ago, and I didn't have my new camera, and I was entirely exhausted. I couldn't go any farther, but I wish I could have. Now, this next image, I took it at Grandview Camp a few years ago. This first image right here shows 2 meteors, 2 for the price of 1, and one photograph. Y'all see those? Few clouds. There's Orion's belt over here, and points down to Sirius over here. This is a plane. Now this light glow right here is the Milky Way, but this glow going like this, you see that? Kind of a triangle shaped? That's called the zodiacal light, and it's sunlight. The sun this is early morning. The sun is below the horizon. It's not dawn yet, but sunlight hitting the dust particles in our plane of our orbit is scattered off, and we see that light. And this time of year, in the early morning toward the east, is the best time to see the zodiacal light. You can see it in the spring, in the evening in the west after sun's gone down and dark has occurred. I've got a time lapse. This is one frame for the time lapse, and I want you to watch this as it goes through this. The zodiacal light will not be very strong at first. Then it will start to build and build and build and get brighter and brighter and brighter, and all of a sudden dawn takes place and wipes it out. It's really kind of a cool effect. See it build? It's building. It's building. And then dawn spoils it. I like that. Comet Neowise in 2020, it was a interesting little comet. I took this back home in northern Kentucky. I went out on July 8th of 2020. There are some neighbor's house. You can see a tree there, and I've got 2 stars circled, and I've got the comet marked. Y'all see the tail pointing up? This is an early morning. 5 days later, I went out and did it again, and you see how much I've got the 2 stars circled again. You can see how much it moved. It moved like 15 or 20 degrees in just 5 days. It was amazing how fast that comet moved. And then it moved into the evening sky, and I went over to someone's house a few miles away from mine to try to take a time lapse of this. And it's really a bad time lapse because I had to zoom in to really capture this thing right, and it was. I didn't think. I was really dumb. I didn't use the little remote that I had. I was doing it manually, and as I did, the thing bounced around on me. And then I had to change the exposure times because I was starting in dusk, and the sky was getting darker as I went. So this is really a bad video, but I want to show it anyway. So I'll see the comet. Okay, watch it now as it sets. And down it goes. And you can see it just gets better as it goes down until gets down there. And there you go. Okay, I took this at Grandview Camp a few years ago. This starts in dusk. You can see Jupiter and Saturn are up here. Right there is Jupiter. There's Saturn. The Milky Way is here. The sky is not dark yet. By the way, remember I showed the image, the video taken in Grand Canyon with the moonlight coming down the slopes? The same thing's going to happen here. This is a month later. And it's what's going to happen is the sky gets dark, and as it gets dark, it just about gets totally dark, and then it gets bright again because the moon rose off to the left. You won't see it, but then you'll see moonlight coming down the hill. And you'll see a guy going around feeding the horses and taking care of other things at the camp the night before. He has the headlights on his car and a flashlight. So a lot of things going on in this thing. Now sky got dark, now it gets bright again, and here comes the moonlight and shadows changing, and there's a guy going around. So a very interesting little video there. Well, 2017 we had a total solar eclipse across the country, and so I ventured out to Oregon to watch this. I was hoping to maximize the clear skies possibility, and I wanted to get a photograph. I've seen this before. People had taken a photograph of the partially eclipsed sun with sunspots, but there weren't any spots for a few weeks before this. And I thought, well, Lord, it'd really be nice if I could have a few spots. Could you help me out? And a few days before, suddenly spots appeared. So I took this photograph. I'll probably never get another one. I'm not greedy. I've got a good one. I'm happy with it. But nothing beats totality. There's one I took during totality, and you may think that a total solar eclipse, well, it gets dark. Well, yeah, but there's far more going on. It's amazing what happens. I'm an outgoing, very talkative person. I've been to 2 total solar eclipses, and during totality, I shut up. And people who know me would start laughing really hard at that point, saying, really? Nothing can shut him up. Well, I'm dumbstruck by it. I really am. It's the total solar eclipse is the most remarkable thing I've ever seen. I've seen 2 of them, and they both were very, very, very different. So if you think you've seen one, you've seen them all. You've only seen one. They are incredible things. And it's remarkable. The circumstances of an eclipse are very narrow. And if the moon were a little farther away, or the sun or the moon a little smaller, there wouldn't be any total solar eclipses. And if they're larger or closer in, they would be common, and they would be wouldn't be very spectacular. Extremely rare circumstances. No other satellites or moons of planets in the solar system do this, and it's the only planet where it matters, because it's the only planet where there are beings like us to appreciate that fact. Now you can just argue that's just a coincidence, right? But I ask you, how many coincidences are you allowed to have before you begin to realize that maybe they aren't coincidences after all? I think this is a marvelous design argument for just the creativity and the awe-inspiring nature of our Creator. And I think having seen 2 total solar eclipses, maybe I've just got a foretaste of what God's glory will be like to experience in eternity. The only thing I can think of to compare to it. I took this photograph with a 35 millimeter camera back in 1979 at my first total solar eclipse. Cameras have come a long way. This is showing the diamond ring effect. Do you see the diamond ring? That's a little bit of the moon's the sun's photosphere, the bright parts leaking out around the edge of the moon. It lasts only an instant, and you're not supposed to look at that because it's quite dangerous. Your eyes are pretty dilated from being in totality, and that first bright thing comes through. It can really scorch your eyes. So when I was at the eclipse in 2017, I was leading this group, and I got towards the end, I got a countdown, and when I got down to 0, I said, okay, everybody look away, look away. I did too. I found out later, both my wife and my son kept looking, and they saw this. And I said, are you out of your mind? I value my eyes. They weren't damaged, but I wouldn't want to take the risk on doing that. Okay, here's another one. I'm not sure if this is a video or not. This is, again, yeah, there you go, another video showing, I've done a number of these. I just can't get enough of it. And there comes the Milky Way coming through that gap once again. Isn't that beautiful? And here comes the moon. The moon's up, and there comes the moonlight down. I did this one in May on a trip I took. May of this year. And finally dawn begins to take place. You ready for this? That's just moonlight. That's just moonlight and then dawn. Isn't that cool? And here's another night. We had some bright moon part of this trip. This is moonlight shining up on these rocks here. Okay? You can see the stars. This is not daytime. It's 13-second exposures. ISO 6400 with a wide-angle lens, a big lens. So watch what happens. This is looking northward, so things are going clockwise around the north celestial pole. Look at the shadows building, creeping upward as the moon is setting off to the left. And the moon sets, at least in the canyon. It's not, we're down in the inner gorge. It's going to take a little while for the moon to finally set for the upper gorge. As it does, the sky gets dark, and then dawn happens. Here it comes. Isn't that cool? All right. If you've really liked my photos, I started collecting these photos back several years ago, and then about 5 years ago, I realized, there's a book here. And it reminds me of Tom Vail. How many people know Tom Vail? Yeah. Just don't raise your hand. I can't see you. Tom Vail founded Canyon Ministries 25 years ago. They're having their 25th anniversary this month. And he wrote a book, 15, 20 years ago called Grand Canyon, A Different View. And it's got different authors who wrote essays. I even have an essay in there, I believe. And Tom was gracious enough to invite me to go on a raft trip. And I was able to do the river with him several times. And he's the master, okay? He's not doing them anymore, so I consider it very, very special that I was able to do the river with him several times. And, a few years later, about 5 years ago, I guess, Georgia Purdom, she's a biologist that works for us at Answers in Genesis. She spent a week on the Galapagos Islands. And same sort of book, the Galapagos Islands, A Different View. Now, why do they call it a different view? Well, if you start talking to anybody about billions of years in evolution, when it comes to biological evolution, how many times they start talking about Galapagos Islands and the finches? Oh, they do every time, don't they? And how many times they talk about Grand Canyon taking millions of years? Both of these are considered to be Class A exhibits for evolution. So we're offering a different view on all of these. So these are part of a series, at least they weren't intended to be, but they came that. Pictures, beautiful pictures with essays written by various people. So I got to thinking, why not have the heavens a different view? And what I did in here is I used some of my photographs, but actually most of the photographs are from these other two people, these amateur astronomers. They graciously allowed me to use their photographs. I didn't show you any of theirs tonight because I just showed you mine. You got to have some reason to get the book. You see their photographs too, and they're very, very, very good photos. I'm not nearly as good as they are. And I wrote all the content in it. It's very similar to those other two books in content. If you're familiar with those, it's the same sort of thing. So I thank you for your attention tonight. Let's bring the lights up, and I'll be happy to do some Q&A. Yeah, they have the lights up, so you can raise your hands now.
Yeah. Yeah, hands are allowed now. And they're still processing all the...
I don't have a question, but I saw something. I've lived in here for 20 years, and I saw something 2 years ago I've never seen in my life before. And I found out, looking into it, that it only happens in Arizona and a few other places that are dry. It's called a solar column. Has anybody seen a solar column?
No?
What it is, it was dark. Sun had gone down already, and it was here. And I just come out of Dollar General. And I come out into the parking lot, and I looked over, and the sun had already set, so it was a little bit light, but not much. There was a vertical shaft of light coming up from the horizon. And as I stood there, another lady came out and looked at it. She said, "What is that?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm going to find out, though." And as we stood there, this shaft of light grew taller and taller, slowly, until it got so tall and then just disappeared.
So it's called a solar column?
A solar column. You can call them. You can look it up.
No, I never heard of it. I'll have to do that.
I had never heard of it either. So as soon as I got home, I looked it up and found one. I didn't have a camera.
Of course. The times I've seen a Starlink constellation recently launched, I didn't have a camera either. So yeah.
When is the next full solar eclipse? A year and a half away, right?
It's
And is it
in
gonna be-
April of 2024, so it's a little less than 2 years.
Will you be where it's going to be?
Absolutely. I don't know where that's going to be. Right? The
You'll be
path
there.
of totality comes out of Mexico, crosses Texas, Arkansas, Indiana. The path of totality just misses the Creation Museum by 3 or 4 miles. But you wouldn't want to be on the edge, because on the edge, your totality lasts a second or so. I want to be near I'm kind of greedy. I want to be at the center line where I can get about 4 minutes. So I don't know where I'm going to be yet. I've been trying to get up a group of some sort, a program. I mean, I got dreams big. I would love to rent out a county fair place, place where a county fair is, and just have a big party and show and everything else. I need someone to guarantee the rental on it, because if it's cloudy, we're not going to be able to do it. That's the trouble with astronomy. It's always at the mercy of the weather. We can't do them rain or shine. So I don't know what's going to happen, but Bob Jones University back in 2017 in Greenville, South Carolina, was in the path of totality. And it was in August, just short before classes were to start, so they decided that they would do a program just to promote themselves and everything else. And they thought, a few hundred people would show up. And they had meetings, and the thing grew and grew and grew and grew. A good friend of mine, an astronomer who's on faculty there, he was the guy there in the spotlight. And they stopped taking reservations at 7,000 people. So I kept thinking, what if Answers in Genesis did a I think we could have 30,000 people show up for something, but I don't know. It's just kind of a big dream. It probably won't happen, but I will be somewhere. I don't know where yet. I'm kicking myself because I went to the one in '79. I went to the one in 2017, and in 1979 I read and been told you have to experience a total solar eclipse to grasp what it is. Anybody here seen totality? Okay. Is it over the top? Fantastic. I mean, it's just, you can't describe it. No words, no pictures really do it justice, because there's so much going on. And then I thought, okay, now I get it. But then I had heard, everyone's different and unique and special, and I didn't get that until I saw my second one. So people who've seen one total solar eclipse, you get it now, just how wonderful it is beyond anything you can describe. Trust me, the next one will be just as wonderful and very different from this one. So it can be habit forming. And there are people who chase them around. In 2017, I heard an interview on the radio with a guy who had been to 38 total solar eclipses. He had gone to every one he possibly could, spending lots of money. Why? Well, because it's way cool. I don't think the fellow is a believer, though. That's the sad part, is he missed the whole point of what's going on here.
Other questions? One over here. All right.
This might be a simple question, but when you show the pictures of the Milky Way, we're in the Milky Way galaxy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are those just arms that we can see from our vantage point?
Yeah, the Milky Way is round and flat. It's got a bulge in the center. I pointed out that bulge a couple of times, and it's sort of like an over easy egg.
Okay.
And the diameter of that disk is on the order of 100,000 light years, and we're about halfway out from the center in the plane of the galaxy. So we're about 25,000 light years from the bulge. We're about 25,000 light years from the edge. So this time of year, when you look towards the southwest now after it gets dark, you can see a thickening in the Milky Way. And as you look up, as you go higher in the sky, it thins out. As you get way up here in the northeast near Cassiopeia, it gets thinner and it gets fainter. Well, you're looking 180 degrees away from the center at that point, and it's thinner there, and it wraps around. There's a good portion we never see. From here, you got to go to the southern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, instead of that bulge being low in the sky, it's high overhead. And it's a beautiful sight, incredible thing to see. So it's round and flat, and we're inside of it, and we're trying to look out and seeing it. These spiral arms you really can't notice because they're inside the galaxy with us, and they didn't really start mapping out spiral arms until well into the 20th century.
So when I look up into the sky near where I live here in the White Mountains, it appears that it might be part of the Milky Way that I can see in the sky, because it looks similar to what
Yeah,
you've shown. Is
that streak of light across the sky, that's the Milky Way.
Okay, that's what I thought. And one last question: have you seen the movie The Privileged Planet?
Yes.
Yes, it's pretty amazing.
Yes,
Some of
a
the
lot
things
of very
you
good
talk
stuff in there. There's some things we would disagree with, but many things we would agree with.
about the total solar eclipse. That,
Yep.
that was just amazing.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, one more.
One of the photographs that you had that was of the total eclipse, up at about, there was one at 12:30, one at 2 o'clock, down around 5 o'clock, right on the edge. There are little orange patches. What are those?
Those are called prominences. And we have some better pictures in the book because we got better people taking pictures than I had. Again, I was avoiding using anybody but my photographs tonight. Again, it gets back to the difference between the camera and the eye. The big white thing that goes out, and I just got the inner part of the corona. It goes out several diameters of the sun. It's this pearly white, and it changes shape every eclipse. It's different. Magnetic field lines you can see threading through it. And then closer in are these blood red loops. They look kind of pinkish in some of the photographs, but really to the eye they're blood red. And there are little loops around the edge, and those are called prominences. And there's special filters where you can see prominences almost any time you want, but it's nothing like during totality. And if you want to take a photograph of this during totality with a camera, with a telescope, the camera attached to the telescope, if you take a short exposure, like 1/60th of a second, you will get the prominences pretty well, but the corona will be underexposed. You won't see it. If you take a longer exposure, like a second or two, you will get the corona, but the prominences will be overexposed. And they're kind of fuzzy, and that's what you were seeing there. They're a little overexposed. The eye sees it all. The eye can see, because it has that logarithmic response, it can compress those differences in brightness. So when you look at it with your eye, the prominences stand out, the corona stands out. And I have never seen a photograph of a total solar eclipse that looked anything like the real deal. The images I have burned into my brain are far better than any picture I've ever taken, ever seen. And so that's when, again, testament to the fact of how different the eye and the camera is. So.
Well,
One more over there, maybe?
oh, okay, yes, another question.
I saw somewhere a couple weeks ago somebody had taken a magnificent picture of Saturn, and they explained it. He was living in Arizona somewhere, but he drove to California to get to the right light and took it off of the top of a parking structure. Have you seen that?
I have not, but probably what he did too is he used one of those. Remember that camera I said I got for Christmas? I still don't know how to use it properly yet. There's a technique that was began to develop in the last 8 or 10 years. I was stunned when I first saw some of these. The guy took some pictures of Mars. And in the past, what you would do is you would take a photograph through the camera and you get what you'd get. And when you look at something like Mars or Jupiter or Saturn through the telescope, you will see the image kind of swims a little bit, and then there'll be an instant of just real clarity, and then it will swim, and there'll be an instant of clarity like this. And what's going on is you get turbulence in the air, air rising and falling, and as the light comes through, it gets refracted by the different densities of the air, so it's going like this. And it's continually changing, so the light's just going everywhere. That's what causes stars to twinkle. Stars don't twinkle, it's the atmosphere doing that. So we're sitting underneath this big ocean of air trying to see through all of this. And Arizona is known for very clear skies. But to tell you the truth, I've never been impressed with Arizona's what we call seeing, how steady the air can be. And in the east, we can get some very kind of hazy nights not very transparent, but at least you can see the planets, and they can be quite steady, better than what you get in Arizona. What this person probably did, they went to California and they were getting the marine layer, where you get very steady air is what you're getting there. I'm going to guess that's what he was doing. But you can even work around that problem with the turbulence. What they do now with these cameras is you will take thousands of images, each one a tiny fraction of a second, and then you have software that will sort through those thousands of images looking for the 30 or 40 of them that happen to be taken at a moment with just an instant with just extremely good clarity to get a sharp image. You take those images out and you stack them to bring the brightness back up.
I think that's exactly what he described.
It's exactly what he did. And so when amateur astronomers started doing this a few years ago, they were getting pictures, and they still get pictures better than anybody, including professionals, could take a generation ago. And if you turn the Hubble Space Telescope to Mars, you wouldn't get anything much better than this. It's amazing what they're doing with these things. And amateurs are doing this. Yeah. If you would have told me 30 years ago amateur astronomers would take photographs like this, I thought you'd be crazy. But amateurs are taking incredibly good photographs, and I still haven't mastered the technique. I need to learn how to do that.
You might want to look this guy up. You know, it was only 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yep.
It was all over the internet, but I was amazed. I saw the image, and I could not believe that it was taken from the Earth.
Yep.
I thought it had to have been taken from the Hubble telescope or something, but it was just beautiful. The rings, everything.
The technology today is impressive, what you can do.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you.
And the software for that program just kind of wrote itself.
Yeah, it did.
One day it just was there. You know?
And you know, one reason why I didn't get into astrophotography years ago is back in the days of film. And film costs money. And development costs money. Last night I took a few photographs at your house. It was 900 images I think I took. And it didn't cost me anything. So, you can't beat that now, can you?
And you got a free breakfast to boot. I mean,
Yeah,
hey.
there you go.
All right, if you have any other questions, I'm sure that you'll be able to find your way up there. One of the questions might be, hey, could you sign this book that I just purchased? And like I say, some of the other things, so please check them out and be thinking about some of the children's things out there. If you know you have kids or grandkids or what have you that might be interested in those kind of things. Again, if you make any purchase at the table, we have several. This is just one of the small little DVDs we give you as a kind of a thank you gift for making a purchase. And with that, I think, I want to say another thank you again for Pastor Rick and Pastor Larry and for the facility here at Calvary Baptist. And thank you all. You're dismissed.
How much time?
1 minute.
It's 10:18 and a half. Oh, there's one up there. Fine.
Are the chickens roasting?
40 seconds. Whoa! Whoa, guys! Whoa! This is really so cool! Oh my gosh! The freaking way!
Try and show some emotion.
You can do like from the hill over the car over home there. Now. It's getting cold. Go! Go! Oh, it's going.
Bat. That's a bat.
Wow. Is it bad?
Yes.
Here it comes. Whoa! See Venus now? Whoa! Oh, yes! Whoa! Oh, yeah! Look at the coronas! See the streamers out!
Yeah, praise you, Jesus! Yeah!
Oh! Yes! Whoa! I see another star below. I see Sirius and Procyon above Venus. Brighter stars. I don't see Orion yet.
Venus is very bright ahead.
Yes!
Overhead.
My camera won't take a picture. Wow! Wow! Oh, I want to see through something.
Oh, man. You want a pair of binoculars? Can you?
With me?
Whoa!
Whoa! It's bright red, you guys.
Oh, that's so
guys go, whatever you're looking, go. Wow.
Bill. Where's Dean Ray?
Midi clips, right here, maxi clips, guys.
Somebody want binoculars?
Oh yeah.
Let's have red. I saw so many wind.
Oh well. Wow.
Yeah, on the right side.
That's a sunset everywhere. Oh, yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
A little on the right side.
20 seconds.
Wow, God, you're so cool.
Till the diamond ring. Yeah.
10 seconds, we're done?
I guess glasses.
I can see a Providence on the right side. On the right side, there's a Providence right there.
Wow, look at that.
Shadow, watch the shadow race away.
Wow.
Whoa, there it goes.
Whoa! What?
Look at that.
Wow. Man, God's so neat. Oh, so amazing. I saw the diamond ring. I was going to put my glasses on and I accidentally looked and I saw it right.
Yeah, right.
Uh-oh.
We're gonna stop.
Oh, we didn't check temperature.
Oh, yeah, temperature.
Down 59, you guys. 59 degrees.
What was it first?
75. 75 to 59.
In what, 2 minutes?
Yeah, and that time. About 15 minutes. As it started to get cooler and darker and shadier.
Yeah. Well,
At what time?
Doesn't it seem like it's getting brighter than it